News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Make it a preset. In just a moment, we're going to get into, as promised at 10 o'clock tonight, Mayor Pete says he mocks us, saying if we don't want EVs and we're resisting EVs, well, I'll just say he mocks us and compares us to previous people that are definitely outdated with, anyway, he mocks us, saying we're basically deniers of technology, kind of a thing. You'll hear him mock us. And also, what do you get for $7.5 billion? B as in boy. How many charging stations you get for $7.5 billion? You're not going to believe it. It's pathetic. It's worse than pathetic. You can't even believe how low it is. But anyway. So, real fast, I wanted to do a little bit more on this. My question for you on Biden today demanding a ceasefire and tying policy to it, including aid. In fact, Biden's co-chair, Chris Coons, who took over his Senate slot because he's a handpicked guy that used to work with him and intern for him back in the day, I think. Anyways, he said on fake news CNN today that he wants the United States to put conditions on military to Israel. At what point does a policy change? Not a Dr. Jill in a meeting with others said, stop it now about the war. Not a Dr. Joe demanding that Joe Biden stop the war. He demanded an immediate ceasefire with Israel today on Benjamin Netanyahu on the phone call today. U.S., as Breitbart points out, effectively adopted Hamas's demand that a ceasefire precedes a deal to release the hostages. Joe doesn't give a frog's fat, you-know-what, about the United States citizens that are currently being held captive and could be rape and sexual torture victims. The UN has already said it's true. It's a fact that women who are hostages of Hamas are being raped and sexually tortured while they're hostages. And Joe does not care because Joe wants to win Michigan, Wisconsin, and some other Muslim-heavy areas, Minnesota. And Joe is willing to sell out the Jews to stand alone like they were left alone to fend for themselves in the previous Holocaust. And this was a Holocaust. They decapitated babies. They decapitated people. They had necrophilia, had sex with dead bodies. They raped babies. I'm not making that up. They raped babies. They raped girls, little girls. They raped teenage girls, and they raped adult women. They raped them. They shot them. They after they gang raped them in front of everybody, which is what some of the witness reports I've chronicled for you. They destroyed the women's genitals with shooting them with guns and with butchering the genitals. This is a satanic, sick cult. Every member not member of Hamas. Don't worry about Hamas. No. Every Gazan. 72% of every person that is a Palestinian that lives in Gaza, 72% still supports Hamas after they raped and murdered all those Jews. They still support them. And that is a Reuters report. Reuters, which is the same thing as Associated Press as far as credibility. I know they're leftists too, but Reuters report from a survey done, an official one. So 72%, almost 3/4 of every Gazan wants to rape and murder Jewish women and men and kill them all. And this is who Joe Biden wants to make sure they can continue to rape and torture and hold hostage innocent Jews who did nothing. It is sick. Israel is this close to finishing off the last 6 brigades. There are 24 brigades of Hamas. There are 6 brigades left. It's either 4 or 6. I think it's 6. I think there's 18 they've killed. There's 6 left. And they cannot kill the rest of them. The terrorists, rapers, and the Jews who are supported by the Gazans, just mind you, which is why none of them should ever come to this country. We don't want them. We don't want anybody who wants to rape and murder and kill every Jew there is. That's what they want. 72% of them. Sorry, I'm disgusted. This is satanic. It's evil. And the fact that our president wants to stop this and not force the hostages to be released and to stop it because he wants to win politically is disgusting and repulsive. I pray to God, I literally do. I pray to our Lord that Israel finishes the damn job and does it and do it stat. Get in there and wipe those sons of bees out. Wipe those terrorists, those satanic devil worshippers out. Now, the other thing is, the question for you, I'll throw out the question again. And that is, if you were Israel, would you go along with a ceasefire, or would you just finish the damn job in Rafah and finish off Hamas? And do you consider it a victory for Israel if they do not go into Rafah? Because it's that last stronghold. That's for the 4 or 6 brigades that are remaining of Hamas left, and that's where the leaders of Hamas, that have only one's been killed out of top 3 that are in country. They need to assassinate the 3 billionaires that are in Qatar in 5-star luxury billionaires, and they need to assassinate them and all their supporters in that family of the billionaire. Please kill them off like you did in with the Olympics. Remember that in '72? Was it not Hamburg? It was Munich 72. I love our Jewish friends, and they are smart, and they are awesome, and they will kill these sons of bees. And I hope they kill every single one of them. If it takes 5 years or 10 years like it did in Munich, yeah, kill them. They killed some of them in the streets of Europe, thinking they were fine 5-10 years later. They killed them. Silencer, killed them, and boom, left. No trace left other than the dead terrorist. Amen. That's what I want to see. I am disgusted by Joe Biden. He's selling out our Jewish brothers and sisters. It's vile. So would you just finish the job if you were Israel? And do you consider it victory for them, Israel, if they don't go into Rafah and finish off the terrorists? 800-288-WBAP, 800-288-9227. I'm sorry. I got super passionate and angry about it. I actually, I'm not sorry. This is evil. This is good versus evil. And I'm disgusted that our president, as liberal and leftist as he is. By the way, here's the pressure he's under, but I literally do not give a frog's fat. You know what? Leadership is leadership. You do what's right. George Bush stood alone with the Al-Anbar awakening. Remember that? When everybody, even almost every Republican, said, get out of Iraq, get out of Iraq. Remember that? And George Bush said, we're going to double and triple down and do the Sunni awakening, the Al-Anbar awakening. And they went in there, and George Bush said, screw you to everybody that was saying no to him, including many in his party. And he finished the job, and we won in Iraq, in the Al-Anbar province. And we won. And then after that, nobody argued with him about finishing it off in there. You can say it was wrong to go in Iraq. Doesn't matter. In the middle of it, he finished that job in Al-Anbar, and it was a victory that everybody wanted to pull out of and lose like another Vietnam. Now, Joe Biden invited for Ramadan, the holy month of Ramadan, all these Muslim leaders, and most of them declined, according to the New York Times. They all declined, not all of them, but many of them. They wanted to do an iftar meal, is what it's called, with the president Tuesday evening of last week, or maybe it was this week, and but they wouldn't. They said, quote, how can we talk to you about famine and starvation over bread and steak, they said. An emergency physician was one of 3 top people that have been in Gaza that Joe Biden was supposed to meet with. Dr. Thayer Ahmad, an emergency physician from Chicago, got up and walked out and said, then I asked to be excused. He walked out of the meeting in front of Joe. He's left to prove a point. He said, I asked to be excused out of respect for my community who's mourning, who's grieving, who has really wanted to be heard, has felt silenced and excluded with this entire time. Before leaving, Ahmad said he gave Biden a letter from an 8-year-old orphan in Rafah. Now, I want to say something else. The numbers, don't listen to these numbers. They lie. They say 30,000 civilians. That's a lie. You know where those numbers come from? Where those 30,000 numbers come from? They say 30,000 civilians were killed? That comes from Hamas, a terrorist organization that's satanic and rapes and kills and murders Jews, okay? The real number is including terrorists, okay? That includes 13,000 terrorists that Israel has slaughtered righteously. So the number is not 30,000. Don't ever forget that. The number is somewhere around between 15 and 20,000. Look, that sounds bad, but listen to this. You're not going to believe this. Listen. Before you condemn it still, watch this. Because what Israel has done in Gaza has never been seen before. It is the shining example. You can laugh, but you're wrong. It is a shining example of how to do a war in urban warfare, and it's never been this successful. Watch this. Number one, they've killed around 9,000 to 12,000 Hamas terrorists, okay, and those 30,000 numbers. The combatant civilian death ratio in Gaza, in other words, for every one terrorist combatant killed, how many civilians die? That's important, right? For one terrorist, 1.5 civilians killed for every one terrorist. 1 to 1.5. Does that sound like 30,000 civilians killed? No, it's 1 to 1.5. Watch this. Ready? It is less than 1 for every 2 civilian killed. In other words, for every combatant, every terrorist killed, 1.5 civilians are killed. As a point of reference, let's go to the liberal, Jew-hating UN. The UN cites its own research, and the UN says civilians usually make up around 90% of the casualties in war. That is a 1 terrorist death, 9 civilian killed. That's what's normal in urban warfare, according to the UN. 1 terrorist dead, 9 civilians. The Israelis are 1 terrorist dead for 1.5 civilians. It's like 6.5 times less. They are doing what has never been done. They should be lauded. All right, I'm done. There's my little mic drop. Next, we're going to get into, as promised, $7.5 billion investment. How many EV charging stations do we get in 2 years with Joe Biden's $7.5 billion investment of our money? Second of all, Mayor Pete mocks people like you and me who may not want EVs in a very lame leftist way that shows how he's so out of touch he insults us. That's next on the Chris Crock Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Let me add one last quick point for my friend Eric Erickson, who is a prolific and very well-known conservative blogger who I follow. We're friends. He used to fill in for me, and he's doing real well now, syndicated in radio as well. And we had him on a couple weeks ago on the show. But he tweeted out this, and I couldn't agree more. Had Benjamin Netanyahu, the president of Israel, the prime minister of Israel, right? Had Netanyahu gone in faster and more ruthlessly against Hamas, we wouldn't be at the point of the American president selling out Israel. Okay, had he gone in faster and more ruthlessly, right? But because Netanyahu went slow to humor the American president, Joe Biden, that president is now throwing Israel under the bus. Doesn't that jibe with who Joe Biden is that we've seen, where he literally says one thing and the next, he immediately changes because of political things or because of incompetence. He immediately changes directions. We're like, what the hell are you doing, right? Whether it be with Middle East policy, whether it be with Russia, all sorts of stuff with national, what do you call it, international and geopolitical issues. Foreign policy, that's it. Thank you. I was looking for the term that Bob Gates said. He's been wrong on every foreign policy issue for 40 years. It's been 10 more years. He's been wrong on every single foreign policy issue for 50 years, and we know it. Okay. Mayor Pete was being interviewed and held accountable for the EV, like shoving it down our throats, forcing us on Fox News. And he mocked people like you and me who don't want, and you may have an EV, and I would love to hear from you too, but he mocked people like you and me that don't want to have an EV. Listen to this. This shows you the way out of touch, far leftist, well-off leftists that are controlling our government.
Let's be clear that the automotive sector is moving toward EVs, and we can't pretend otherwise. Sometimes when these debates happen, I feel like it's the early 2000s, and I'm talking to some people who think that we can just have landline phones forever. The reality is that the automotive sector is moving toward EVs, and the U.S. can either fall behind China or we can claim the lead. President Biden wants to make sure that those EVs are made in America.
Do you really feel that people like me and possibly you, do you really feel that people that are resisting EVs like me are living behind the times? Are we like people who didn't get landlines or didn't want to leave our landline and didn't want to get a cell phone? Is that really who we are? Or are we smart people who are middle class or upper middle class that don't want to buy a car that is useless outside of the metropolitan area? And if you have a bunch of trips, in your day, you don't get an EV because you're not going to sit there and charge it all day. And because it's very expensive, it's $10,000 more than the average combustible engine. And it's expensive, and the repairs and the energy costs are equal to that of a combustion engine, but yeah, you're going to pay $10,000 less for the combustion engine. Do you really think that you and I are behind the time? Do you think that Mayor Pete is right, that if you don't want an EV now, you're way behind the times? 800-288-WBAP is our number. 800-288-9227. Absolutely not true. at all. I don't want to destroy my environment with electric vehicles. I don't want to destroy my grid with electric vehicles. I don't want to take a battery the size of the car and throw it in the trash, literally in the ground, because they can't recycle and they can't do anything with the materials. And throw it in the ground and poison it and have leaching possible stuff down in the ground eventually. I don't want. China is literally providing. There's two sources for all of the minerals, that cobalt and nickel and all the stuff that goes into making a battery. They come from China, communist China, and when they get the rare earth minerals, they go through 2,000 pounds of rock to get a handful of minerals. And when they get 2,000 pounds of rock to get a handful of minerals, guess what? They use fossil fuel to with the cranes, the excavators, and all that stuff. They use fossil fuel. This is not helping the environment at all. And it is lining the pockets of communist China. Most of the parts, the batteries and such, come from China. Mayor Pete says, do we want to make China get ahead or do we want to get ahead? Mayor Pete, the number one selling vehicle for the stupid trucks. You guys are trying to get semi-trucks replaced. We talked about that boondoggle the other day. The number one supplier for trucks that are being forced to be sold in California is BYD. That's a Chinese company. You're making the Chi-Coms richer and wealthier. And the Chi-Coms also own, I had a guy on who wrote a book called Cobalt Red, Harvard professor. We probably didn't agree politically on anything, but he was great. I caught him on Joe Rogan. On a Twitter, my Twitter feed. I got him on here. His book is called Cobalt Red, and there are slaves, literally. He got video of it, 8 seconds he could smuggle from his cell phone. 8 seconds of the slavery. It's like Moses time. Thousands and thousands of African slaves in the Congo and other areas, the Congolese. And China owns the mines. The African dictators and such are selling out their country, and they're enslaving people. The child is 9 years old. He's a slave. He's handling cobalt with his raw materials. The mom, child gets $1 a day. Mom says he can't eat. We cannot eat without the child. The child can't go to school. He's got to be a slave. And that's what you're doing to get your stupid thing that Mayor Pete says we want to do. Kim in Burleson, you're on News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.
But I think we're just denying the inevitable, man. We don't necessarily have to get rid of our gas cars, but my wife, she works 7 miles away. I'm seriously considering getting her one. You know, I'm not going to get rid of my truck, obviously, but I think they're just going to force this stuff on us, and we won't have a say in another.
Ooh, this is going to be good. I don't want to rush you. Can you stand by? I can't wait to have a discussion with you on this.
Sure.
Good. Thank you very much. This is going to be fascinating. Stand by, Kim. Plus your call, 800-288-WBAP is our number, 800-288-9227. Do you think Mayor Pete is right? Kim seems to think so. If you don't want an EV now, you're way behind the times. 800-288-WBAP is our number, 800-288-9227. We continue with this coming up next on the Chris Crock Show. Plus, what is $7.5 billion that Joe Biden took of our taxpayer money? What does it get? How many charging stations does it get in 2 years? You're not going to believe this. Next. In just a few, we're going to get into. This is very interesting with Trump. We have a new Wall Street Journal poll talking about how Trump's leading in 6 of 7 swing states. And I wonder what you think about that, if you think it's too good to be true, or do you think and Trump will end up losing again, or do you think this will hold steady and possibly leads to a Trump victory in November, as I certainly hope, and I'm sure you do too. But first, Kim did not hold. I don't know why, but he didn't hold. Basically, I got a little bit from him. He's in Burleson, and he says his wife is 7 miles or 7 minutes? I forget, one of the two. I think 7 minutes away. She works 7 minutes away from him. And he's seriously looking at one. And he thinks Mayor Pete is right. Listen to this. Here he is. Here's Mayor Pete.
That the automotive sector is moving toward EVs, and we can't pretend otherwise. Sometimes when these debates happen, I feel like it's the early 2000s, and I'm talking to some people who think that we can just have landline phones forever. The reality is that the automotive sector is moving toward EVs, and the U.S. can either fall behind China or we can claim the lead. President Biden wants to make sure that those EVs are made in America.
Okay, that's a very false statement. Number one, I don't think people like me who are not wanting to ever get EVs for now, never. I would certainly consider a hybrid if my mechanic recommends them. I think he's okay with them, but never an EV. Why? here's one example for you. A man who had a Tesla, one of the $100,000 Teslas, his battery, he went to the Tesla dealership regularly, to the regular maintenance. They never told him his battery was getting closer to, being on the way out, right? And when he found out his new battery to replace it would be, I think he said $29,000. He literally said, I'm not paying $29,000, or was it $25,000? One of those. I'm not paying that for my vehicle. And Tesla locked him out of his car. They said, you're going to put the new battery in there, and they locked him out of his car. And he was trying to sell it without buying the new battery, and they locked him out of his own damn car. Do you freaking want a car that somebody can lock you out of remotely? Are you kidding me? Do you think this government of ours can be trusted if Joe Biden gets in, or somebody like him, another fourth term of Barack Hussein Obama? The Chinese have hacked some of these electric vehicles, by the way. So do you think, do you trust dude, in freaking Europe, they're doing digital wallets, and they're stopping people from going about during those COVID protests and stuff like that. They were stopping people and like literally making them so they can't go certain places at all. Or, you know what I mean? I don't want to empower anybody. Number two, but let's get back to the battery. One couple bought their daughter a Nissan Leaf, I think it was, for $14,000. And the daughter had the car. It was like 5 years old. The daughter had the car, and it was used, obviously. And within a year, the battery had to be replaced, and it was $11,000. A $14,000 car. A year later, after they bought it for their daughter to go to and from college, a $14,000 car suddenly needed an $11,000 battery. Are you kidding me? You want to sign up for that? Number two, battery fires. Plano, this just happened a couple months ago. We talked about it. The battery was serviced at the Tesla dealership. The car was serviced the next day. The battery was serviced the next day. This battery caught on fire in the guy's garage. And, a lot of our houses are attached to our garages, like mine is, or most of us are. Your garage catches fire with your EV in it. Those EV fires go for 10, 12 hours. And they don't go till it's completely gone. The car's completely melted to the ground. Everything's melted. Your house is gone. In this case, they got there quick enough to yank the car out, and it burned forever in the street in front of the guy's house. But the house fires are drastic. But so your battery will have to be replaced, from everything I've seen and learned, within 5 years, and it's going to cost you $10, $20,000 for that battery. Hell no. What is the worst repair you and I have ever had on our cars? I have two cars. One's got 127,000 miles on it. It's 2014. The other one's 2017 with 100,000 miles on it. Man, the worst repair I think I've had yet is maybe $1,000. You know what I'm saying? Can you imagine having to come up with $10,000 or $20,000 on a car that you paid $10,000 on a car that you paid $10,000 more for the car I bought? You know what I'm saying? When my car was brand new, it was like 30 or 35. Back in the day. And can you imagine that being 45 and then like 5 years later having to come up with $20,000? Now, the guy, Kim, in the last segment, and I wish we could have had a discussion, but he said his wife is 7 minutes away. Okay, well, that's not practical for 90% of us. I had a listener who called in one night. He had a Nissan Leaf, and he lived in Burleson, actually, where this gentleman lives that called in. And he had to go Burleson, Fort Worth, and a couple stops in Fort Worth. He said his car could not make it. He literally sold it within, I think, less than a year. He said he told the story on the air. I was like, wow, I was shocked. It was like a year ago. And he's like, I could never go anywhere. It was always I had to charge it somewhere, and I couldn't do 3 or 4 or 5 stops from Burleson into Fort Worth, and then over here in Fort Worth, and here, and then back home without it having to be charged and spending hours. I could never go anywhere. It is not practical. The Chinese do the minerals, as I said, and that's where almost all of the minerals, the battery comes from. Number two, the other parts are the other rare earth minerals come from slaves, and this is not an exaggeration. They are 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 15 and 18 and 22-year-old slaves that work in mines. And the 9-year-olds are on the ground with their bare hands. They're lucky if they have a spoon, and they're scooping cobalt right out of the earth right there. Cobalt causes cancer and many other deadly side effects, holding raw cobalt with nothing protecting them. And the moms say, and I spent 30 to 45 minutes on the air with the Harvard professor who did this expose in a book called Cobalt Red. He was on Joe Rogan's show before I had him on. And these children, their moms say, we get $1 a day to send our 9-year-old, but if they don't go and do that instead of going to school, if they don't do that, we don't eat. That's what you're supporting. Now, if you want that little boy slave to get his ass out there and get you something to get that cancer so you can get your EV, you go ahead. It's bad enough that stuff is what it takes to get our phone batteries and our laptop batteries, just so you know. That's what he told me. I mean, this is Harvard professor, read his book. It's real. So I don't want to be a part of any of that. And our electric grid cannot handle it. You know that, right? What does California tell you right now when they have their brownouts and blackouts? What do they say? No EV charging. So your car sits there and you can't charge it. Our grid is right behind California. We're basically at California. Our grid has been Californianized, and I've chronicled that to the Wall Street Journal. And here's the editorial that I pulled. There's a million of them I got from the Journal. Baseload plants cannot turn a profit operating only when needed to back up renewables. So they are closing. So in other words, our gas, do you know that when we had that near grid collapse, our natural gas, if you look at the chart from the Journal, I've tweeted out 1 million times on my Twitter feed. It's astounding. You see natural gas and then the grid comes close to collapse and natural gas goes up 450%. You can turn natural gas from the normal amount it produces for our grid and you can crank it up 450%. To keep the grid pumping. That saved us. But here, let me read on. Baseload plants can't turn a profit operating only when needed to back up renewables. So they're closing. This was the main culprit, Wall Street Journal says, this was the main culprit for Texas' week-long power outage in February 2021 and the eastern United States rolling blackouts during Christmas 2022. The media will discover this problem eventually, though not this year, if it might call into question Biden's climate agenda. Perhaps they'll notice when more blackouts arrive. So our Texas grid, Governor Abbott is responsible a lot for this. So is Governor Perry and former Governor Bush. They started this, not counter-incentivizing the federal government, giving energy companies tons of money to build wind and solar plants. All the wind and solar, that is bastardizing our grid and has for decades because the energy companies want to make money. I don't blame them, but they make more money with our federal government sending them tons of subsidies to make this crap. But that crap, when it goes down because the sun doesn't shine and because the wind's not blowing, like in the bad weather we have the grid, the only thing that saved us was natural gas. Natural gas cannot, and nor can coal, which did save us too, by the way, and nuclear did. But natural gas and coal can't survive if they're not being used regularly. They're not going to keep a natural gas plant open that's only used, 1 week a month. They can't make money. So we passed the thing that we all signed on to if we did it past Texas, that said we'll give like billions of dollars of our taxpayer money in the extra money we have left over from rainy day stuff or extra funds, right? Budget excess or whatever it's called. And we had that go towards incentivization for fossil fuel plants to be built, incentivizing them. I don't know if it's going to be enough because I think it needs to be more, and we need to completely counter incentive. This is all a disaster. It is a road to nowhere. And look, if you got one, God bless you. That's fine. There's conservatives that have them. I will not get one. I am rabidly against one. And by the way, Tesla, their numbers have gone down. Their sales have gone down this past quarter 8.5% from the year before. 8.5% lower. Okay. And by the way, don't listen to me. Google it yourself and see. And don't do it to Google. Do it to DuckDuckGo is almost as bad, but something that's not as ultra conservative. Just do the Wall Street Journal. Search for that. It might be behind the paywall, but search for a more conservative publication that's trustworthy, and you will see the stories are amazing. How bad the sales are on EVs. Every one of them. The dealerships can't unload them. Now, if you want to jump in on something that nobody else wants to get, like a lot of people have stopped getting them because of all the things I've described, then you go right ahead. Okay? But what you got to do, we had a listener who called in, he's got like 5 cars. He can afford that. He's got an EV. That's great. The point is that cannot be, you can't use that for long drive. You can't use that for long drives. You can't use that to go 5 hours away, 4 hours away or longer. It's an unmitigated disaster. A guy had an EV. I'm late. Real fast. A guy had an EV Lightning. He had a Ford Lightning. He's got money. He lives in Canada. He was sold on this 100%. He bought the expensive Lightning charger for his business, for his house, and he was excited to take his first road trip from Canada down to Chicago, and he literally ended in Minnesota where he could not find an EV charging station, and he had to get the car. He literally had to reroute to the opposite direction in Minnesota, go to a dealership. He left the car there. He rented a gas truck, and drove down to Chicago. It was a nightmare, and he said he will never buy one again. There was a Canadian guy he bought into the whole thing. That's what you're signing up for. Not me, guys. Not me. All right. And by the way, Biden's $7.5 billion investment in EV charging stations. This is the future, Mayor Pete, right? $7.5 billion of our money for EV chargers in 2 years has only produced 7 stations, 7 charging stations with 38 bays. 7 stations, 38 total bays for $7.5 billion in 2 years. Do you understand that? That's more than $1 billion per charging area. More than $1 billion. What's the math? Do the math for me real fast. Not now, but when we come back, tell me what the math is. Producer Garrett. So $7.5 billion for 38 bays. What does that do? What is that per bay? Like one bay where you can plug in one car. That'll be fun. We'll tell you what it is coming up next. And then we're also going to do some other stuff. We're going to hold off on the Trump stuff. I want to get into coming up next on the Chris Crock Show on News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. You have to hear another massive brawl, 5-on-5 brawl at the Rangers versus the Devils game, not the hockey game. And then a courageous canine killed while protecting an officer from MS-13. I'm going to tell you about that and much more coming up next. Chris Crock, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Here's the problem. We got 2 guys that are radio guys, not math guys. I am so bad. I can't tell. I have, when I put 7... And then he goes, you think what goes on the bottom, what goes on the top? I don't even know. I'm trying to figure out, and I'll just admit this, I don't know. It's $7.5 billion divided by 38. What is that? I got one number here at, it's like 197 million per bay. I guess that would be right, actually. I don't know. Yeah, because 100 million is a billion. No, I don't know. Anyways, I can't figure it out, but it's 7 charging stations, like a gas station, okay? And they got Joe Biden took our money for the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a lie. It's a new Green Deal. And he spent $7.5 billion of our money in 2 years, and he's only got 7 charging stations with 38 bays. So it's like 7 gas stations with 38 pumps. You know what I mean? Total. So it's either 197 million per bay, per gas pump, if you will, or it's 5.0666667 E minus 9. I don't know what that means. So I don't know. Yeah. Okay, maybe it's 5.6 million per bay. I don't even know. Anyways, all I know is $7.1 billion roughly for one energy station is a disaster. It's a joke, and that's your Joe Biden. That's what the EV nightmare is. Now, as promised, the NHL, I love doing this when there's this guy who has been fighting, and that's all he does is fight. He goes into the hockey game and he fights. And I'm like, is that the same guy? He's really tall and he just starts fighting all the time. Yes, it is. It's him. We have audio of this guy doing it again. And this time it turned one fight turned into 5 fights, 8 ejections, 2 seconds into the game. That's what happened. Here we go. Let's play this audio.
Both sides. Lazar went the other side as well. Jimmy Vesey and Lazar. Gaudreau has dropped them with Kevin Ball as well. Now it's 5-on-5. McDermott and Rempe exchanging blows. But everybody has gloves off at the Garden. DeAndre Miller and John Marino. There's only 4 officials. There's 5 fights. They're trying to break up what they can. Meanwhile, Rempe and McDermott still throwing it. DeAndre Miller got the better of John Marino down on the other end. As McDermott still feeding rights to Rempe. The other 4 are all done. The main event's still going.
This is unbelievable. Holy jumping, what a start to this one right here. But McDermott's got it. He had a couple of uppercuts.
This is still going on, the brawl.
This is a marathon between Rempe and McDermott.
It's like a boxing match where they remember they become like an Apollo Creed or whatever with Rocky. They end up hanging on each other. They can't because they're barely able to punch. They're doing that here. Still going on.
Completely out of gas.
It's this
Completely out of gas. Holy jump.
There you go. They ended up it turned into 5 brawls at one time. Yeah, it's 5 freaking brawls with 5 different guys fighting 5 different guys. Matt Rempe, the Rangers' hulking right-wing prospect. He's the one who, if all he does is get in and fight right away. That's all he does. Okay, one more quick thing as promised. Courageous canine killed while protecting officer from MS-13 gang members in a Virginia prison attack. Thanks, Joe Biden, for more of these illegals. The dog's name is Philip Fields is the officer. Rivian responded to the attack. Rivian was violently and repeatedly stabbed and kicked by inmates. The dog was 5 years old, would have turned 6 at the end of April. Rivian has been part of the K9 unit since 2019, and a memorial for that wonderful service dog will be held. This was in Virginia. K9 Rivian, rest in peace. They are officers, and we love them very much. God bless that doggy.